All right, hi everybody. Today we're going to be doing lesson 5.5b, but we're going to be doing it in one day. So our goals are to be able to graph an equation in standard form by finding the x and y intercepts. Then we're also going to review horizontal and vertical lines. So you're going to want to be on page 41 in your notes. All right, if you take a look at standard form again, you might be wondering, how do you graph this, being that the a, the b, and the c don't represent a slope or an intercept? Well, when an equation is in standard form, it allows you very quickly to find the intercepts, and with the intercepts, you can graph it. So we're going to be talking a little bit about intercepts before we start. First of all, let's take a look at some points on the y-axis. If you look at this y-axis, all of these points have something in common. The x-coordinate is 0, and the y-coordinate tells you the location of the point. Like this y-coordinate's 8, it's 8 units up on the y-axis. This one's -4 because it's down 4 units on the y-axis. If you look at the x-axis, going across, and take a look at some points, you'll see that they all have something in common. There's a 0 in the y-coordinate, but the x-coordinate tells you the location of the point. So the 10 over here tells you that it's over 10 units on the x-axis. And here it's back 9 units on the x-axis. So if we're able to figure out the x and y intercepts of a line, the place that the line's going to touch the x-axis and touch the y-axis, if you're able to find those, then you can graph those 2 points and draw the line. And when an equation is in standard form, it makes it really easy to figure out the 2 intercepts. Now notice these intercepts. There's a 0 here in the x location, and there's a 0 in the y location. We're going to be using that in order to help us find these intercepts. So let's give it a try. In example number 1, we have a linear equation in standard form. And what we're going to do is find the x and the y-intercept, the place where this line is going to touch the x-axis, and the place where the line will touch the y-axis. And then we're going to use that to graph. Okay? So remember, if we're looking for the x-intercept, we're looking for a point along the x-axis. And every single point along the x-axis, if we think about that point, the y-coordinate's always 0. We want to find the location of the point on the x-axis, so we want to find the x-coordinate. So knowing that y is 0, I can use this equation, and I can plug 0 in for y and figure out what x is. Go ahead and do this along with me. So I'm going to plug 0 right here for y, and now I'm going to solve the equation for x. Well, I know that 6 times 0 is just 0. So it's kind of like this cancels out. Even if you cover it with your finger, you could solve in your head for x. Think about dividing this by 2 and dividing this by 2, you'd have x is 9, because that cancels out. So when y is 0, x is 9. So we've just solved for an ordered pair that's a solution to this equation. That's the x-intercept. So if we go on the graph and we plot the point 9, 0, that would be all the way to the right 9, and we wouldn't go up or down. That's the point 9, 0. You don't have to put the numbers there, but that's the point. Okay, now we have to find the y-intercept. So along the y-axis, we know that the x values are 0, and we want to find the y value, the location on the y-intercept. Okay, so we're going to use the same equation, and you probably guessed it. This time we're going to plug in 0 for x right here. And we're going to solve our equation for y. Now do you notice that 2 times 0 is 0? So if I just cover this up, I can divide by 6 in my head, and I know y is 3. That's kind of a quick trick to doing this. So when x is 0, y is 3. So the y-intercept is at 0, 3. So again, 0 right or left, and all the way up 3. Now what I can do with these 2 points is connect them. That's not very perfect, but connect them and I have the line. Now I'd like to show you something so you can see how this worked, because it's kind of interesting how you can graph like this. If you were to rewrite this equation and we were to solve it for y. So if you just want to watch me do that real quick, hopefully I don't make any mistakes. Negative 2x plus 18. I get y equals, this simplifies to negative 1/3. plus 3. That would be the equation of the line. Now notice the y-intercept is supposed to be positive 3, and it is. The slope is negative 1/3. So up 1, left 3, up 1, left 3, up 1, left 3, up 1, left 3. Do you see that? That is the slope of the line. So I could rewrite this y equals mx plus b and graph it, but it's much quicker even and more practical just to find the intercepts. Okay, so let's try this again with example number 2. So here we have an equation in standard form. We're again going to find the x and y intercept. Now sometimes what kids like to do, instead of using an ordered pair, with the x-intercept, we know we're solving for x and we want to make the y 0. Sometimes kids will just make a table like this and they say, okay, I'm finding the x-intercept, so I'm finding x, I'm going to make y 0. And so then they just do this as a table. It works too. So we want to use this equation, and we're going to plug in 0 for y and solve for x. So of course, this negative 2 times 0, it goes away, it becomes 0. So if I were just to cover it with my finger, you can see that x is negative 2. The x-intercept is negative 2. So I could just plug in negative 2 right over here right away. You could continue solving it, bring down the x, if you'd like. And there we have the x-intercept. So go to the x-axis. On the x-axis, we're going to go right to negative 2. Now let's find the y. I'll use a different color so you can see what I'm doing. So the y-intercept. With the y-intercept, if you go back to our table here, see we got negative 2. We could then just put 0 right here for x, and now we're going to solve for y. So x minus 2y. Okay, this time we're plugging in 0 for x. So I'm going to make this x a 0. And again, if you make that x into a 0, you can cover it up. Now solve for y. You divide by negative 2 on both sides, and you get y as 1. And there's my intercept, and there's my table. So sometimes kids like to just kind of see it in a table. So intercepts on the y-axis, up 1, positive 1, right here. And then I can connect the line. There's your line. Now to show you again how this worked, I could take this equation and quickly rewrite it. This would be positive 1/2 x, and this would be positive 1. Again, you can see that the y-intercept is at 1, which it is right here, and the slope is 1/2, up 1 over 2, up 1 over 2, up 1 over 2. And you can see that that's true also. So graphing in standard form by finding the intercepts really does work. Okay, I'm going to have you skip ahead to number 6. It might be kind of hard to see this because when I printed it, it blacked out. But this equation says y minus 7, and this equation says x equals negative 4. Now, I know that we've talked about how to graph these before, but I just want to show you a little trick with this. These are equations that are written with one variable. And in fact, this equation right here is written in standard form. You just don't notice it like that because in this particular one, the b and the c would be just 0, okay? So we're just going to revisit this a little bit. Now there is a little trick to doing this. You can use an acronym that is HOY. Can you write it down with me? VUX. HOY VUX. Now if I was in class, I would make you say that. HOY VUX, but I'm not. So lucky for you. Now, a lot of kids use these acronyms just to help them remember what these lines should look like, and I'm going to help you with that right now. So if we get an equation that says y equals 7, this linear equation, a straight line, can only cross through the y-axis at 7. So you go to the y-axis and you go up 7 and you make a point. Now it can only touch through the y-axis. So if I cut through the y-axis, I would have to draw a horizontal line just like that. Because you see my y-axis like my finger here? The line's only cutting through that. It's not going to ever touch the x-axis because it's parallel with it. So that would be my line. Now, where does HOY come in? Well, HOY, these letters here represent something. This right here is a horizontal line. So a horizontal line would have what slope? Well, completely flat like this would be a 0 slope. So right here, this is representing a 0, the number 0, even though it looks like an O. And what do you think the y means? Well, the y represents the y equals equation. So if I have a horizontal line, it's going to have a 0 slope with a y equals equation. Super helpful in a lot of cases, and I'm going to actually be coming back to this once we get a little further along in the chapter. Now, VUX, you might be guessing what the V stands for, and you're right, it's vertical. So if I have an x equals equation, I know I'm going to have a vertical line. It's only going to touch the x-axis at -4. So I go to this x-axis at -4, make a point, and it can only cut through the x-axis. So it would have to be vertical. Now, what do you think the u represents? You might have guessed it, an undefined slope. Notice that that's undefined. And the x represents an x equals equation. So if I'm ever given an x equals equation, I think VUX with the x. VUX, vertical, undefined slope, and boom, I can graph it. Same thing here. If I'm ever given a y equals equation, just a y, I think HOI, horizontal 0 slope, and I can easily graph it. So just like a quick little review and maybe something to help you remember the two, HOI, VUX. All right, in your summary, you're going to see this, and unfortunately, when I printed this, these would have been on clicks. But if we're trying to find the x-intercept, we want to figure out the x. We're trying to find the x, we make the y into a 0. If we're trying to find the y-intercept, we want to find the value of y, and we make the x 0. Okay? And then I kind of showed you a little bit with the cover trick where I covered with my finger. So when you flip to here, page 44, you're going to see this summarize again. This is where I would kind of split the lesson into 2 days. But since we're doing this in 1 day, if we summarize, when we're trying to find the x-intercept, which one of the coordinates is 0? You're right, the y is 0. I want to find the x-intercept, so I want to find the value of the x. And if I'm finding the y-intercept, any point on the y-axis, the x is 0. If I'm trying to find the y-intercept, I'm trying to find the value of y. Okay, so just a quick little recap there. So now this would be day 2, but we're doing it in 1 day because of all the snow days. So we're going to look at example number 1 here on this page. So I'm asked to find the x and the y-intercept, and here's the equation. No graph, we're not going to graph it, we're just going to find both of the intercepts. So thinking about what intercepts means, that's where the line's going to touch the x and the y-axis, and we know that those points are going to have a 0 in it. So maybe I'm already thinking about those 2 points. One of the points has a 0 in the x-coordinate, and the other point has a 0 in the y-coordinate. So maybe setting up a table could be helpful for you. So with this equation, if I'm finding the y-intercept, I'm finding the y-coordinate, I make x 0. Okay, y is 0. Now again, I can use the cover trick. 3 times 0 is 0, so I can cover it up, and I can solve. And then when I divide this, it's 9, right? So when x is 0, y is 9. So there's my y-intercept. And now let's find the x. Now with the x-intercept, I want to find the value of x and make y 0. So I'm going to use the same equation. This time I'm going to make the y-coordinate 0. 0. So do you see here how this -5 times 0 would make 0? So if I cover it up, I then can maybe even do this in my head. Divide by 3, divide by 3. I could do that. Or I could just cross this off, bring down the 3x, and show my work. -15. So right here, -15, 0. That would be that order pair, and that would be that order pair. So I've got my x and my y intercepts. Number 2, we're asked just to find the x-intercept. So where would this equation cross the x-axis if you were to graph it? So now I have to think a little bit. X-intercept. I know on the x-axis, one of the coordinates is 0. Which one? Yep, if I'm trying to find the x-intercept, I'm trying to find the value of x, and the y is 0. So I go to the equation. I want to solve for x to get the x-intercept, so I make y 0. Okay, again, I could cover this and in my head divide by 14 here and divide by 14 here and get the answer. Or I can work it out. That cancels, it makes 0. Divide by 14. Negative 7/14 is negative half. And so the x-intercept would be negative half. So if you graphed it, it would touch the x-axis at negative half. There's your x-intercept. On number 3, we're asked to find the y-intercept of this equation. So to find the y-intercept, you know that when it touches the y-axis, one of the coordinates will be 0. And of course, if I'm trying to find the y-intercept, I want the y-coordinate, so x is 0. So I can take this equation and I can make x 0. So think about if I plugged 0 right in here for x. This would go away. So I could cover it and just solve the rest of the equation if you wanted to. Or you can write it all out. So here, 0, negative 8y equals 26. Now this isn't going to be a very nice number. I have negative 26/8. And I know that I can simplify that because both of those numbers are divisible by 2. So I get negative 13/4. So that would be my, my y-intercept. And even if I rewrote it, it's still this, if as a mixed number, it would be negative 3 1/4. So it's going to be touching the y-axis at negative 3 1/4. Okay, so there's my y-intercept. Now, I also could find the y-intercept by taking this equation and rewriting it. Think about the slope-intercept form of a line. You know that this right here is your y-intercept. So I could take this equation and rewrite it, y equals mx plus b, and find the b, because that's the y-intercept. That's another way of doing it. Okay, so that's all we're going to be doing here, and I'm going to show you what your practice is now. I'm going to actually have you on IXL today. You're going to be doing these 3 IXL lessons. S19 is graphing horizontal and vertical lines. And when you're doing that, you can be thinking of Hoy, Vux to help you out. Okay, if you see a horizontal line, it's going to have a y equals equation. If you see a vertical line, it would have an x equals equation. So that will maybe help you out a little bit. S16, you're going to be finding x and y intercepts. And then S17, you'll be graphing the equation once you've found the x and y intercepts. So it might be wise to work in this order. This order, I put it this way because this will get done the quickest, and then the other two will take a little bit longer. Okay? Good luck, and I'll see you tomorrow.